Hello, and welcome to Frugal Noodle, the show dedicated to helping you understand retirement, whether it be early or otherwise, and financial independence. This is your host, Cody, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the stages of financial independence. And everybody's favorite, the disclaimer that I am not a financial expert. This is not financial advice, just me educating on my journey, and hopefully you pick up some stuff along the way. Now, this is open for interpretation. A lot of people have a different approach to defining each stage. There's even several gurus of finance and investments that have their own formula or idea behind what is, in fact, a stage within financial independence. So I'm going to just cover a few of them, and really it's going to come down to your own research in the end on what you would consider the stage that you're at, where you're headed, and really what guidelines you want to follow as far as the different types of stages that are out there. So one of the basic ideas of the stages of financial independence starts out at stage 0, which is where you are dependent, completely, totally dependent on others, and you're not doing anything financially for yourself to create wealth and take care of your financial needs. Now, dependence, this initial stage, can be defined as when you're living under your parents' roof, no job, and they're taking care of all your needs. That's the simplest level of it. To get to the higher level of what financial dependence is still technically considered, that would be basically living outside of your means, spending more than you are earning, whether it be taking on more debt for financial loans for school or anything similar. But basically, your take-home rate from any employment that you have isn't enough to outweigh the money that's pouring out of your living situation, household, etc. Borrowing money from family and friends to get by, things like that would be considered financial dependence. So the next stage, stage 1, would be solvency, which essentially means that you are no longer dependent on others to necessarily take care of your financial needs. You may have loans still, but you don't need to borrow money from friends or family. You don't necessarily live anywhere free. You're not taking advantage of anyone around you to survive financially. You're going to still have debt. You're going to still have student loans, similar type of loans, auto loans, mortgage, etc. A lot of people are in this stage, and a lot of people live through this stage their whole lives. But basically, you've reached the stage of solvency once you are beyond a job that doesn't satisfy your needs financially and moving into a job that does, career that does, and you're taking home enough money to take care of your bills and any of your other commitments, such as loans, as mentioned before. So the next stage is once you've reached financial stability, stage 2. So financial stability basically looks like you are starting to pay off some of those debts that you have. Your job's going well, career's going well, and you're able to start saving money even. So you're taking care of your debts. They're not all gone, and maybe none of them are, but you're hitting them harder than they're hitting you, which is a very good position to be in. And you're building up an emergency fund or something to improve your home. It's just some sort of savings to be able to rely on. And this is basically where a lot of people are trying to get to. And because they don't fully grasp their potential with their money, they have a hard time getting here. They can envision it, but they can't let go of certain desires to spend their money on. That makes it harder to get here. Now, stage 3 is considered freedom from debt. And what that means is not necessarily you are 100% debt free, but it means that you are nearly debt free in most aspects. You're no longer, working paycheck to paycheck to get by as you might be in the earlier stages. You are actually building a rather significant emergency fund. You're not concerned so much about what tomorrow is going to look like as far as any surprise expenses because you are prepared for them. You've likely paid off any of your bigger loans, like your student loans, or you may be hitting your mortgage harder, or your car is completely paid off. And essentially, this is where you start to feel like you are thriving financially in a sense. The problem with this stage is that as people start to get to this point, they get caught up in what is known as lifestyle inflation, where you maybe have achieved a great raise at work or a new job that is a better pay in general than where you were before. And you say, well, now I'm making more. I need a nicer car. I need a nicer house. I need something to symbolize the status that I have achieved. And that's where, if you're starting to hit this stage 3 freedom from debt situation, people regress sometimes multiple stages backwards because they're living outside of their means. And that's a mindset that you really need to get yourself out of if you want to hit that fire goal that you have established. And this is the stage that I would say my wife and I are at. We're not 100% debt free. Like I mentioned in the previous episodes, we are free of all debt except for our mortgage. It's a very amazing place to be, especially as someone who was pretty inept when it came to finances before. And I'm not claiming to be an expert by any means, but I do feel that the stage we're at right now could be considered debt freedom to an extent. We have an emergency fund. We have time to dabble in investments quite a bit, and we're saving as much money as we can. We're not stuck in the 5 to 10% area of saving our take home money. We're really pushing it as far as we can without necessarily living like we're, broke or anything like that. We want to be able to still live a fulfilling life, and that's not necessarily achieved through money, but we also don't want to live the way we did when we were stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment, just trying to figure out where we were going to go next in our jobs and careers. So another way to describe stage 3 debt freedom is, again, kind of getting into the world of investing, where you start to understand your money as a tool to grow on its own when you put it in the right places. And that's, again, where my wife and I are, by investing into ETFs, index funds, even more so in our 401k and IRAs, and just other investment vehicles that will grow your money. And I think that once people hit this stage, it's where it starts to all fall into place and click, that what you were doing before was not the wisest thing, but it was also something that you needed to get through to learn how to get where you are now. Speaking hypothetically, if you're not there yet, but I promise you, once you hit this stage of financial independence, it is oh so enlightening. Now, stage 4 is where you've reached financial security. Another way to word it would be nearly FU money. And if you've never heard of the term FU money, that's fine. But there's a really good video. It's an excerpt from a movie where John Goodman is describing what FU money is. And it's basically having enough money that, sure, you can keep working and growing it, but as soon as somebody, your boss, a coworker, or whatever, makes it more miserable to continue working and growing it than to just go off and do your own thing, you can just say, F you, I'm done with this, I don't need it. And then your money can carry you through the rest of your life, or until you figure out what to do next. That's not quite what this stage is, but it's on its way. And basically what financial security looks like, stage 4, is having returns from your investments that are adequate enough to take care of all of your needs to survive that month, whether it be your bills for your home, utilities, food, etc. The basic necessities of life are covered by the returns that your investments are churning out. So essentially, it's having security, knowing that if something happened to your job tomorrow or whatever financial hardship could come your way, you know that your returns from your investments are enough to cover those basics. Now, of course, this isn't enough to quit your day job, to give up on this road. Some people might consider it enough, but if you want to be able to continue growing your money in retirement, then you know that you need more than this, because let's say you can get by on $1,500 a month, and that's what your monthly return from your investments are. Great, you can survive off your money, but as I discussed in the 4% rule episode, it's not enough to not only cover those needs, but also cover your wants and also cover inflation. You need to be able to safely pull 4% of your investment returns, because that extra 3% that you will gain on average with an annual average return of 7% will cover those inflationary increases. Now, stage 5 is financial independence. Financial independence is basically hitting that FIRE goal you set for yourself. It's not the final stage for some, but this might be the stage where you say, I have hit where I need to because I am satisfied and I can quit my job, go do my own thing. Don't need to worry anymore. I have enough of a return from my investments every year that I know that for the rest of my life, I'm fine and I don't need to worry about any expenses now or in the future. So this is covering your basic needs, and it's also covering your desire to maybe travel every so often or do anything that you would consider only a want, essentially. Now, stage 6 is considered the abundance stage, where you've hit that goal, you've pushed it further, and your money is not only growing every year because you have enough to cover your expenses and inflation, you also have enough to just continually grow your money because you're living well below your means still, and your money is able to be redistributed to other investments. Maybe it's buying more properties to rent out or investing in perhaps business prospects. Maybe you're able to be more charitable with your money and donate to causes that you feel passionate about. In this stage, while it's a stage of abundance for your money, it's also a stage for you to decide what kind of things you want your money to do that it was never able to do before because you've got so much. It's not necessarily a stage that everyone is aiming for. This is kind of more of that fat FIRE scenario. And back in episode 2, I talked about what fat FIRE is. It's just one of the types of fires you can aim for. Stage 5, where you are financially independent, is where a lot of people will settle because they just don't want to keep giving their time up to their employer. A lot of people will push it to stage 6 though, because they want more, and that's fine. Personally, I am a stage 5 person. I am chasing for that time I can finally step away from my desk at work and spend the rest of my life with my family, knowing that my time is mine and I don't need to worry financially. Now, those are the broad steps of financial independence. Dave Ramsey, one of the gurus in finance, if you've ever heard of him, you've definitely heard of his baby steps. But basically, this is more of a finer breakdown of how to gain financial independence and more so, I guess, financial stability. It's not about necessarily retiring early, these steps, but I think they are helpful, especially the first few ones to kind of get you off on the road. They definitely kicked me off in the right direction. But basically, it starts with step 1, which is building a emergency fund. It's just a starter, though. It doesn't cover the extent of your needs for months. It's just enough to deal with any immediate emergency that really you should determine. His baby step says $1,000. That's more than a lot of people have in their savings. So that's great, but it might be more for you. It depends really on your scenario. So maybe it's 2,000, maybe it's more. I really don't think that you should go any less than 1,000 though, just because I have seen plenty of expenses as a homeowner. Maybe that makes my scenario different than most, but plenty of situations where $1,000 just isn't enough. I don't face them often, but when you do want to have that money, and you really don't want to end up contributing to your debt when it arrives. Now, step number 2 is paying off all of your debt except the house. The method he uses and describes is the debt snowball, which is essentially targeting the higher interest rate loans and credit cards that you have with any extra money that you can throw at it, while also paying the minimums on the lower interest rate items. And so essentially, if you have a credit card with a 16% APR, then you would throw as much money as that as you can. If you had maybe another credit card with 10% and a vehicle loan with 5%, those other two, you're just going to pay the minimum. The 16%, you're going to try to throw as much extra money at it as you can until it's gone. And then you take all that extra money that you're throwing at it and throw it at the second credit card. And then till that's gone, you will then jump to the auto loan and pay that off until all your debt's gone. Obviously, a lot of people have student loans. People have the auto loans. They have credit cards. There's a whole lot of loans you can have. My wife and I had quite a few to go through ourselves. But once you really just focus on it, you step away from some of those consumeristic mindsets that I've discussed a little bit before, maybe canceling your popcorn subscription. You find that there's a lot more money that you can contribute to this debt and get rid of it. And once you get rid of a couple of them, you're going to feel so much weight off your shoulders. Honestly, it is addicting to have another debt paid off, and you just want to keep doing it until it's all gone. And that leads you into step 3, which is saving that 3 to 6 month emergency fund, something that you can easily fall back on. A lot of people will just hold this into a savings account. There are high yield savings accounts. There's Varo Bank, which is one that we signed up for. I think that's a great way to have very liquid money. And what liquid means is money that you can easily pull out at any given time. But personally, my choice with my wife was to contribute the money to an ETF and use that as our emergency fund. The reason being is that it's going to grow a lot more than any savings account will let you. And in most cases, depending on who you work with, it's easy enough to pull that money out within a few days. And then we would use a credit card as a buffer if something was truly immediate. The reason for all of that is simply we want the money to grow. And when it sits in a savings account, especially if it's not a high yield savings account, it just won't grow. It won't combat inflation. So it's a great way to set your money in a place that you know will continue to grow. Now, how do you calculate the 3 to 6 months? Well, it's pretty simple. And for us, we just took truly what our needs were and a little extra on top of them. But what we spend our money on in a month on groceries, on our utilities, our mortgage and gas bills, etc., we took that and just very simply calculated it out for 3 months. And then we said, okay, that's what we need to keep in one location so it's easy to pull out when needed. Now, step number 4 is investing 15% of your household income into retirement. That's Dave Ramsey's step. That's a very great goal. And if you can hit that, that's phenomenal. If you're someone who's truly chasing that FIRE goal, that financial independence, retire early goal, 15% is a lot more than most Americans contribute to their retirement. But if you can hit more, you should strive to do so, because that's only going to bring retirement closer to you. And that's exactly what we do. We just contribute as much money as we can to our investments in retirement so that that day can come to us quicker. Now, step 5 and on, it's, again, these are Dave Ramsey's ideas of what the baby steps look like, and they're all great. Step 5 is contribute to your children's college fund. There's ways to do that. You can do a lot of like child care accounts or child investment accounts, and we'll describe some of those in the future. I think that one of the ways that you can do this easily, though, is by doing your own investing and knowing that some of the money will be towards your children's college fund. I think another thing to note, though, is that not everyone does contribute to their child's college fund, for the sake that the lesson of getting into debt is a very important one, because it teaches you to not get into debt too deep and manage it properly up front. We're not necessarily parents that have decided that we're going to throw our child into debt, in college fund debt, but we do know that we will have what is necessary to cushion that and not necessarily pay for college outright. It's still something that we're figuring out. Nothing's final, and we have many, many, many years until that day comes. But essentially, there are ways to grow your money towards your children's college fund without opening like a college account or one of those accounts that really just don't have a high enough yield to combat inflation, or really the way that college tuition is inflating. It's just unreal. So that's baby step 5, but I think it's open for interpretation for each person. And number 6 is paying off your home early. This one kind of goes against a lot of people's opinions in the FIRE movement. A lot of people say any money that you throw extra at your home's principal, obviously that's great in bringing that day of paying your home off early closer, but it doesn't help growing your investments. And the longer your money has time to sit as an investment, the more it can grow over time. So if you paid off your house early, that's great, but none of that money to pay off your house early grew. Your home's equity grows on its own. It doesn't matter how early you pay it off. But the more money you can put into index funds or some other investment vehicle, the longer it has to grow to a greater number. We have teetered on this one a little bit. We would love to have no home expense, and that's why some people do think paying off your home early is a valuable thing to do, because once you have no home expense, then your FIRE goal number is now significantly lower, and then your house is just completely an asset. It's something that occasionally we'll throw a little extra at our principal on our home, but really nothing major that would pay off our house earlier by any substantial amount. But that's baby step 6. And then baby step 7 is build wealth and give, which is essentially exactly what it sounds like. You are at a stage of financial stability that your money is just growing and growing and growing because of all the choices you've made in the past and because of all the choices you're making in present. And you are able to contribute money to noble causes, which a lot of hard-earned money, wealthy people will say that donations and being able to give money to good causes is the one way to maintain wealth. We can definitely get into this some more in the future. Some of the numbers and figures I've heard out there is like 10% is what people contribute to charitable causes. We do that a little bit on our side as far as what we contribute. It's not 10%, but it's definitely rewarding to be able to say, I'm in a good enough position that I can contribute to some noble charitable cause. And it's not necessarily for the sake of making ourselves feel good, but just knowing that we're fortunate enough to do so. So those are the 7 baby steps through Dave Ramsey, and just one example of the financial independence stages, the stages of financial independence. There are so many interpretations, though. There are so many gurus that have their own steps to wealth and how to make millions. And there's courses and whole lots of resources out there that are free. There are some that cost money too. But basically, if you're really early on this path, it's important to just understand what stage you are at and where you are headed and how to get there. And the only way to do that is to have a roadmap. And that's exactly why there are so many interpretations to that roadmap. So I think a takeaway would be to just look at your status now. Where are you at? Don't get down about it or pompous about it or whatever. Maybe, yeah, get pompous if you want to. But ultimately, just always take time to evaluate, take stock, know where you're at and where you're headed so you can stay on your path and keep your goal in front of you as a carrot, dangle a carrot or whatever, some sort of analogy. I don't really have anything inspiring to say on this, although I will say that there are many budgeting apps out there, and we use Mint because it's just so easy to load in your different accounts, and it tracks your spending. It tracks where that spending is going to. It's not the most accurate. Sometimes you have to tweak the spending things. Like when we transfer money from our bank account to a investment account, or even from checking to savings, it doesn't always get it right and kind of treats it as an expense. But it also treats it as an income. So it's a little confusing on that, but it does a really good job of giving you a snapshot of where your investments are, where your debts are, where your checking is, savings are, and takes all of that and generates a net worth. It's really good if it has access to all of your accounts. There are a lot of investment websites. I've mentioned that my wife and I do dabble in crypto, and it doesn't have access to all of those accounts so much. But if you maintain those on the side, you have that main snapshot to refer to. It'll give you a clear idea of where you are and where you're headed. And it's important to be able to do that because it's motivating to see where you're at. It's like when you're walking through the zoo and you keep coming to those maps and you just really want to see the lions, and you're like getting closer and closer to the lions. And finally you can see just around the bend on the map up ahead, you got to get around like the gorilla exhibit, which is like always empty. It's like that. So you're like, oh, I just got to get around this empty gorilla exhibit, and then I'm going to see the lions that I came here to see. And I'm personally a giraffe guy. Like I love the giraffes. They're really tall. So I really like giraffes, but it's like having that map to be able to say, I'm so close to why I set off on this journey in the first place. So whatever you need to use, there are so many budgeting tools out there. There are Excel sheets that you can maintain on your own, and a wealth of apps. So I'll leave some links down below in the show notes, and hopefully you partake and really jump nose first into this amazing road that is set before you and available for everyone. Thank you for listening to Frugal Noodle. The music for this episode was produced by CARBS. You can follow the show wherever you get podcasts to stay up to date on episodes, and follow Frugal Noodle on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and everywhere else in my link tree that is in the show notes. This is Cody. Thank you for listening.